Alrighty, good morning everybody. Hope everyone's well rested and ready to look at data preparation in Trimble Business Centre. If you've got any questions or anything as we go through the presentation, feel free to throw them into the comments, and just so that we can sort of have a bit of a look at them. This will be just a brief overview of the data preparation tab that's in Trimble Business Centre and how it sort of will relate and work for a lot of you out there in the survey and site construction world. All right, let's get started. So we're going to have a bit of a look at the data preparation tab. Now it's a separate module in TBC, and it's generally set in the site modeling edition. So the site modeling edition, it's set for the converting and elevating of 2D data into like 3D data so that you can use it in the field. And it also incorporates a function called the project cleanup, which will automatically clean up your data, so removing unwanted layers and a few of those other bits and pieces that can be quite troublesome when you're getting third-party data from somewhere that you don't really trust, or it's in different layering conventions and it's just a little bit all over the shop. I don't know how many times I've had that in the world of surveying. So the site modeling edition itself and the actual workflow is sort of dedicated to preparation of the elevation of contours, pads and lines, and especially good for that, as I said, importing that external data, being able to use data that is conventionally 2D, that's some draftsman's gone and prepared, and you've got lines going all over the shop. Some are at zero and some are at on datum, and it's all over the shop. So you're able to use this function to be able to elevate that information and make it actually true representation of what was intended by the designer, or and from the other information you've been provided on hard copy plans. You're able to go through and map layers, and mapping layers is where you can bring it into your convention, your layering convention. So say you've imported a drawing from one engineer and they've got a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll have a look at this a little bit later when we jump over to TBC, but there's a design where the designers have used X and then a whole bunch of letters and numbers after it, but you want to bring that into your layering convention. You can edit that and change that by using an MXL file, a mapping file, to show and actually change it to your format so that it's to your business's liking, to what you guys would generally see as surveyors or site managers or whatever else. So that's actually able to be in your business's convention. The other way of doing it, or the other workflow for this, is a project cleanup tool. As I mentioned, we'll go and look at that and how that relates to looking at changing your data and all that sort of stuff. Surface and site improvement, so being able to elevate your data. So you might have a mesh or a DTM or contours, and elevate your 2D data up to that so that you can go and set out curb returns and curbing and center lines and so on. And then there's other ways of like variable offset lines, and then doing vertical designs, which we won't really touch on today. More of it's just showing you sort of the ins and outs and the general workflow of being able to change some information and get it out into the field. So obviously, just to rehash a couple of things. So importing data into TBC, as most of you probably already know, anybody that's sort of been watching on already, importing data into TBC is really easy. You're able to drag and drop it straight into plan view and be able to present the image, as you can see on the right hand side of the screen. Or you can then go through the home tab, import, and select the files from there, and you can select multiple, so you can drag and drop as many in as you want, and most of the time at the end of the day you'll just either receive an error message that will show you what wasn't imported, and any warnings as well. So the error message could be that hatches weren't brought in, so you wouldn't really care too much about that because the hatching is not really needed, and then the warnings are that all the textiles, for instance, that were used in Revit or 12D or one of those other software packages don't really match what we've got in TBC. So TBC just reverts it back to a plain line string that a solid line, for instance. So data import options, so you DWG, DXFs, so .job.dc, so that's more surveying, XMLs, bring in just .raw files, TZFs, all those sorts of things, they can be brought in. So just be mindful of that, and TBC will automatically recognize what the file is, and we'll tell you a bit more about it as you go. So one other thing I want to quickly touch on and revisit, we've looked at the View Filter Manager previously, and the View Filter Manager is a way of sort of isolating and turning data on and off and looking at how we want it to present in our plan view. So here on the left-hand side of the screen, we have what the typical View Filter Manager would look like, with our raw data, photogrammetry, flags, and then all those subsets of their information. In the center of the screen, we have what we would call all our selection icons. So for instance, you can copy a view, which we'll again look at a little bit in a moment, but if you want to copy a view, for instance, you've got a view set and you've got everything turned on apart from, total station and a few other things, you can copy that view and then rename it and change it to something else. You can rename a view and save it and sort of revisit that later. You can zoom extents on everything that's currently in the view. So as you sort of isolate through different layers as we look at things, and I'll show you a bit of that in a minute, how that would sort of work. Hide and isolate. You want to isolate a layer, or you want to hide all the objects instead of a selected object. So say you select the curb, you can then select that and it'll turn everything else off and you'll just see that. Or you can go and click isolate layer and then physically filter through each layer and sort of see them all as they would sort of fit amongst themselves, and sort of choose and see what everything is. And again, we'll look at that in a minute. All right. Now, as we said, data cleanup. We'll look at this as well. The data cleanup tab or the data prep tab has the data or project cleanup function. The project cleanup is really good for being able to remove a lot of that unwanted stuff that's imported when you bring in a CAD drawing. Instance blocks, line styles, some text styles, dimensioning, line lengths that are like insignificant, but in the world of their to 15 decimal places, and they're still there. But we can't really do anything with them, but they're just an entity that TBC will look at that. You can set some constraints as to what you want TBC to look at, and it will remove that data for you, so it's sort of not there. It'll also automatically join some of those lines together as well if they're within a certain spacing. So on the screen at the moment it's set to 1 mil. So anything that's 1 millimeter apart, and it's the same line and everything, that will actually join those two together. Now, just so you know, 1 millimeter is not just horizontally, it's also vertically. And just bear with me for 1 second. I've just got a fella, Chris Smith, wants to take control. Sorry, Chris. I'm going to just keep plugging along for the moment. So the 1 millimeter will be related to it's horizontally and vertically. So if it's not quite 1 mil, you might have to blow that out a little bit to make things join and those sorts of things. But again, we'll look at that in a minute. And again, on the right hand side, the status bar, you can see as it's gone through, and in this example, for instance, it joined lines with the small gaps and overlaps of 17, so almost 1700 lines. So what we might do now is take a quick look at TBC and go through and play around with some data. Okay, so TBC, we have next to tunnels and takeoffs, the data prep tab. Now again, that can be positioned anywhere, but the data prep tab itself is again isolated to the site modeling edition. So you might have it on your screen if you're running a 30-day license, or you may have turned on if you've got Survey Advanced, for instance, but it might not work. It's based on your license. So unfortunately, if you want to talk to somebody about upgrading a license, have a chat to your Trimble rep or your UPG rep to see what we can do about that. Okay, so running across the top through our data prep tab, we have our first one as we just discussed before, which is our project cleanup, as we automatically go through and it sort of removes some of that information. Our selection tools, so this sort of CAD section, we'll look at how to deal with some of that CAD information. So selection tools, what do you want to select? Do you want to select points, duplicates, elevations, layers? Do you want to invert a selection if you've selected something but you want to select everything else and do something else with it? Exploding and so on and so forth. And then we move into layering, customization. I mentioned those mappings of layers before, sits in here. Elevating our information, bringing it up to DTM, or up to the design. You can bring 2D information up and manipulate it that way. Creation of surfaces, and then some of our line information, which is very similar to as you would see in either the CAD tab. So it's, as in Trimble's world, there's some stuff in this tab that is in somewhere else as well in TBC. So yeah, some things might work in this tab and some things might not, depending on your license. Just be wary of that if you don't have site modeling, you probably will not be able to use this. But if you need a 30-day license, please contact UPG and we will get you a license to sort of a bit of a trial and a bit of a play. All right, so let's load some data in. Nice and quick and easy road. So this is a design that was provided for us for training, and it's just a very simple road with, I think it's a couple of 100 meters worth. Okay, so here's our data. I'm just going to turn my contour or my grid lines off. I don't really want that on, just so that make it a bit easier to see the information that we're looking at. And let's have a bit of a peruse through the data. So looks like we've got some curb lines, and if we've got some text, got our DTM mesh. Looks like we got some contours sitting in there. So yes, we got some contours, some minors and majors by the looks of it. And as we sort of run through some other bits and pieces, like what's this here? It looks like it's limit of works. Okay, all right, no worries. So first thing that we're really going to do is, how does everything sort of look in 3D? 2D representation as we're looking at the moment. Let's see what we think in 3D. Okay, all right, as expected, we have our DTM, which is actually on datum, and then everything else seems to be presented well below that. So we'll bring some of that data up and I'll show you some of the functions to be able to do that, and get you guys moving to send some of this data out to the field. Also layering, let's have a bit of a look on the left hand side of the screen. In our view filter manager at the moment, we have a whole bunch of random layers, as we mentioned before, and here's some of those information, some of that information from the design where it's all defined as X. We can go through and rename those layers and change them to whatever we want, or we can group them into different groupings, and to make it easy to turn it on and off, and I'll do that in a minute. So first thing I will do though is quickly do a project cleanup, and I'm just going to take out some of that random gumph that we don't want to see. So if I go click project cleanup, and our project cleanup function window appears, I'm going to do it of the entire project. There's no other there's no other selections or anything else, so I don't really care too much about that. We want to go and remove those unwanted blocks, the line styles, the text styles, and so on and so forth. I'm going to set it at the 1 mil tolerance for the 0 line lengths. Any duplicate lines, so lines on top of each other, I'm going to remove them as well. Don't think there's going to be any overlapping line loops, but I'll add that in anyway. Anything that's sort of misconnecting, I've sort of said 3 mil, gave it a little bit more to sort of connect it up. It could be that there's a couple of mil between points or nodes, or something hasn't been snapped in the design 100%, so I'll just give it a little bit extra. A couple of 3 mils, not really going to make any much difference. But again, it's set to your company's and what you're comfortable with as a designer or as a surveyor. If you don't obviously want to change it too much from design, you want to keep it pretty much the same. And down the bottom, we have a way of cleaning the data up as well. in elevation, which can be quite important if you've got a whole bunch of random bits and bobs that are, some are at 0 and your datum's 100, and you've got some at 0 and you've got some at 10 and you've got some somewhere else. You can set anything that's sort of below a certain range, and in that range it'll automatically set it to an undefined, flatten everything down onto one level, and then you can go through and pick that data out and bring it back up to where you need to later on. Anyway, so I'm just going to leave it all that as it is, and I'm just going to click apply and run through and delete anything that we don't want to see. As you can see, just cleaned up some layers. A whole bunch of layers went out that had nothing in them, so we've cleaned that up automatically. We've gotten through and fixed 61 lines that weren't joined, and so on and so forth. So that's just the first thing I always run through. Just get rid of some of the information that we don't want to see. Make it a bit easier to manipulate. We know that there's nothing in there that we sort of don't want to see. Now, I know that there's some data in here that doesn't sit in the right layers, but let's have a bit of a look at how they sit, and we're going to look at our View Filter Manager. So if we isolate layer, it'll bring up the layer tree, and we can go through and now flick through our layers and have a look at each one on its own. So for instance, that's text. Looks like property boundary by a certain DP as that limiter works, and it looks like it's got another piece of text that's been randomly thrown in somewhere else. Some curbing, so it looks like we've got some nice standard box curbing, and then what would look like some sort of a concrete guttering on the other side of the road to help with stormwater. Centerline, a curb line of some description, some chainage information. Okay, so that's where our triangles sit. Contours, looks like there's nothing in that layer. And if you click zoom extents up the top in the icon next to the isolate layers, it will actually zoom extents related to whatever you selected. So I just zoom extents, and obviously there's nothing in the points layer. There's nothing in, there's a 0 layer. So it looks like we've got some random junk that's in there that we can put somewhere else and get it out of 0. And then we have a default layer, which that looks quite interesting. I don't know what that is. Could be some survey data by the looks of it. Yes, it's survey data that someone's picked up, probably of the existing curb line before it was redesigned. So we can rename that layer as well and put it somewhere else. So let's just, whilst we think about it, our 0 layer, I will isolate that again, and anything in that 0 layer, I'm just gonna put it somewhere else. So first way of doing that is to go to your properties and create a new layer. As you can see here, we're going to just call it, and it's going to be design. As the convention that we'll be using today, I'll just use the word design in front of anything that's design, and then I'm going to call it trash, for instance. I don't really, it's not of any interest, and then just close that. It automatically throws that into a new layer called design trash over here, and then it frees up our 0 layer for other things that get imported later on. Just so you know, 0 layer and points layer are the 2 layers that you cannot delete, and it will always be in TBC. So if you do have a 0 layer and a points layer, points for survey and things like that, you can leave data in there, but 0 I'll always clean out, so that as things get imported in or things are done later on, I know that where it's sort of come from when it's not from somewhere else. Now, our data that's in default, that's in survey, I want to go through and I want to rename that layer as well, and relayer all those objects. But I'm not going to do it from our data prep tab. I'm going to do it for a new command that I've learned recently, and it's called relayer objects. Now, one way of doing it is to go up to the top of your command pane. You can press F12 or go to your quick access toolbar and go to your command pane, and you can search for relayer objects. Now, this function will allow you to select items and then automatically relayer them back into a new layer. And at the same time, as if you set this as a shortcut command, you can quickly go through and shortcut command it back in, and select something and shortcut it, and control, for instance, control L is what I've set, and I can quickly relayer everything that's in my selection without having to go through and do a whole bunch of button clicks. So I'm going to, as an example, just going to select some of this information here. I've selected a few points. Looks like there's 10 objects there. I'm going to throw it into a new layer. I'm going to call it Survey Unknown, because we don't know where it comes from. Just leave it as white, close, and there it is there. Click OK. Now that data has automatically been pulled out and has now gone over to Survey Unknown. So if I click Isolate, Survey Unknown, that's where the data's gone. Now you can, as I said, set up a shortcut command. So if you go to Support and Define Command Shortcuts, you can go and scroll down and find your relayer command. So relayer objects, so that's it there. And then, as you can see, I've automatically given it a shortcut of Control L. So if you want to go through and do that, there's some ways of being able to easily create some shortcuts that aren't already in TBC, if there's something you're going to be using all the time. So in this case, if I click, and I'm going to press it now, Control L, it automatically brings up the relayer command. If I select some data, actually I'll go the other way around, select some data like this and do Control L, it will actually automatically throw that data that I've just selected straight into that layer that I previously used. So be wary of that. If you want to change the layer, don't select anything, Control L, and you can then change your layer, select what you want, and then click OK, and then again later on go back through and just select what you want. So I'm just going to select some more, select a whole bunch of it like that, Control L, it throws it into our Survey Unknown. I'll just do the rest of it now. Okay, and that gets rid of our default. Anything that's in default, there's nothing in there anymore. I don't have to worry about that. That's just another layer that can go bye-bye. Okay, so we now also want to make it a little bit easier to view some of our data in our layering. So in this case, I'm going to sort of create some groupings to be able to view the data a little bit better. So you can go through your layer manager, and then start going through and assigning layers that way. So currently we have no groups available. Or if you really feel like it and you just want to do it all quickly, go to your command pane again, and we're going to search for group, layer group manager, and then we can go through and start creating all our new group layers. You can also flick back and forth, obviously, in each one of these tabs, back and forth to whether it be layer manager, or you can select the layer that you want to put in there. Let's just add some groups. So I'm going to call one design, another one's going to be survey, another one's going to be DTM, and another one's going to be trash. And so there we go. There's our 4 groups. Now 4 groups have then been created in our layer grouping over here on the left hand side in the View Filter Manager. So let's go through and just quickly assign some of this. It won't take too long once I'm in there. So anything that's X will automatically go into that layer, like design. We want survey, these 2. Survey as well. There we go. These 2 are our contouring information and our DTM, so I'll just put them into DTM just for later so that I can play around with them if I need to. And then obviously trash, I'm going to put that into my trash bin, and any other layers that we see later on. Actually, I'll go through, I'll do this one. So this working limits, I'm going to put it in trash. I don't want it. I don't care. It's not something that we're going to probably need. If you do want it, you can always pull it out later on and use it. Again, horses for courses for each person. And if I turn that off and turn all my data back on, so we have all our data. I can now easily turn off trash, and anything that's in trash is turned off. I can turn off anything that's survey. I don't really care about that. We can look at that later. now let's quickly rerun the data prep tab, the project cleanup, and just leave everything as it is. Just go through and apply it. It'll hopefully won't change anything apart from removes one layer, and we're now left with our plane 0 and points. All right, so we want to obviously bring up our data to match our DTM. We will look at our centerline, and so we're looking at X centerline 02 SST, and we will turn everything else off except for that. And then we also have our left on. We have our DTM, so we can turn off our contours, because really a contour is not the best representation. It's a graphical representation of what's there. You can use it if that's all you have to elevate your information, but I have a DTM which is much more cleaner, so I'll just turn off my contours and use it. So let's bring up that line. Now there is a whole bunch of nodes here as well, just isolated random blocks, which we can go through and put into trash later on, because they're not going to be used. But let's elevate this line. So you can change the elevation of the data if you wanted to. So if you click change elevation, it's the same as what you'd see in the survey tab or CAD. You can go through and change it by a delta elevation. So what you know from your assumed up to datum. An absolute value, again, everything will be at the same level. You can set it to undefined, so it'll be have a question mark instead of an actual numeric value. You can have it set off relative to a point or something like that. You can again set another elevation of a line through vertical options. You can add it to a surface and those sorts of things. But just to bring that line up to the DTM, we're just going to use elevate line, which will elevate the 2D and 3D lines up to various other options. So if you had some text in the data, say you had some contour intervals, or you had some points with like leader lines and text off that, you can actually use that information, and TBC will look at that information and help bring up the information to where you want it to be. So if we had some text in here that had some elevation on it, I could go through and do insert via text. You can select the text that you want it to bring up, and then bring it up through that. But in this case, I'm just going to use it by intersecting lines. So intersecting lines, all the intersecting lines of the 3D mesh, the 3D triangles, will elevate this line up to that. So you have offset tolerance as to however much you want to set that. Now, our intersecting lines, obviously I don't want to go through and have to try and select every line here. I'm going to do it via layer. So if you click options, you'll have some more selection options. You can do it by elevation range, or in this case layer, and I know that it's triangles, so there it is. It's selected our triangles, and our line, I'm just going to select the line manually, and that should be all we need to do. We click apply, and it's brought that line up to the DTM. Now obviously as the DTM falls short, we might want to do something with this line towards this end of it, whether we want to project that grade on, assess the grade along the center line, or we can go back to the actual drawings and see what it's meant to be at the intersection down here. So that's the quick and easy way to elevate some information. You can go through and then obviously clean up more of your data. So if I now turn on curbs, so there's all our curbs. Again, same sort of thing. It's all set off in the middle of nowhere, so we want to bring all that up. Again, the easiest way to do that, lines, and I'll quickly just do it so that we can see it. I'm going to go by layer. I'm going to bring it up now by the triangles, close, and then again all the lines that I want to bring up, I'm going to bring them up by layer as well, and I'm going to select the D-Design 20, which selected all that. Click close, apply, and it's brought all that information up. So now we have a lot of our line work is actually up on the DTM. We can start manipulating some of it, analyzing the curb returns. Obviously this DTM doesn't fit very well with a curb return, so you want to go back through your cross sections and reassess the curb returns and the curb return rigid geometry and set some vertical information. And again, the easiest way of doing that, if you had some known points, you can go through and edit your line, go through and change your vertical, set your vertical information as you go through your alignment for your curve return. Now, that's just a very basic overview. Obviously, all this other data that's sort of down below, we can just go and throw that into another layer. We don't really want to see any of that. That doesn't have any information that we really want to see. You can just go and dump it into a new layer by Control L for pre-layer objects, or if you really want, just click onto the side here. I'm just going to go put it in trash. It's not something I want to see. That's sort of the very basic idea of elevating and doing some data prep from DTM data. You can elevate pads, so if you've got a 2D line and you can then create actual building pads and things off that. You can elevate data from spot levels as well. So if you've got a few spot levels, you can create some 3D data off that information. You can create some surfaces in here as well. So let's go through and create a TTM or a surface for our design, and we're going to go and call it design, apply, make it magenta. Magenta. Selection. We're going to go by our triangles again. There it is. Close, apply. And that did not turn out the way we wanted it to. It is meshed everything. Forgive me for that. Let's just go through and isolate that one layer. Turn everything else off. There we go. And create our surface that way. Again, design, magenta. There we go. So there's our mesh, and we can go and use that for any sort of grading and other things like that, or going doing a conformance or something on a surface. You can obviously add all your other surface information here, and you can do some editing and whatever else. So that's the basic run through of just data prep. If you had a building site, a construction site, you probably find you'd spend hours going through cleaning up some of the data and removing your columns and your pads and removing your set downs and wet areas and all those sorts of things. So that's where your mapping of layers and being able to standardize your layering will sort of come in, and sort of any further information on that you can sort of give us, give the UPG team a call, and we can walk you through sort of the best ways to do that. Now, I'm going to flick over now to some questions, but first, before I turn the mic on for everybody, Trimble have a really good system on the Trimble Retrieve platform, where you can actually go and learn again all these sorts of things that we're showing you through UPG, but there's a more in-depth run-throughs, for instance, on data preparation for building sites and for earthwork sites. So if you're interested in having a bit of a look at that, please send your Trimble rep. I should put my email address up, but send your Trimble rep UPG, give UPG a call, and we can put you through one of the technical consultants, and we'll set you up with all the information you need for that to become an expert with TBC, it's called, and get some understanding. So what I'll do now is I'll open up the floor to everybody and throw some questions at you, and I'll have a bit of a look at what we've got in the participants. And okay, so everyone's unmuted, so everyone can go through and ask any questions they've got. I'll go back through and have a look at. Currently no questions. Thanks, Mark, for putting your email address up there. I will actually throw mine in there now as well, for anybody that would like it. So If you've got any questions about today's presentation, please feel free, give us a call or send us a message, and sort of go through. Any questions from anybody out there? No? All right, no worries. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that, and I hope everybody learnt something. If you feel free to give us a call or get in contact if there's anything you need to got any questions about. Cheers.